Hey everyone, am I live? I usually don't do the tech stuff myself, but I'm here, I think. Maybe someone can tell me if you can see and hear me. Hey everyone. Okay, I think I'm live. Okay, it's just probably a delay, so I will start going and I'm sure the chat will catch up. Oh, there. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, folks. Okay. So, let's talk about color. Welcome to the live stream. I'm Marco. You already know that. You're on my channel here. What I want to do today is kind of an extension of what I did just a few last week over on the Proco channel. Just more color talk. There's always tons of stuff to get to. I have the chat on my screen this time, so I will be able to see it. Yeah, someone baked soda, high quality webcam. Yeah, it's this. It's the same webcam. My webcam is fine. I don't know what happened with that Proco stream on the webcam, but we are good to go. I made sure the connection was good. All right, we'll go for just over an hour. I'm not stuck to any time limit, but I want to respect everyone else's time, so we'll go for an hour. I will post a link here. You can sign up for the replay of this. Okay, hang on a second. All right. I'm going to post a link in the chat. I believe this live chat will be unlisted after this, but if you want the replay, you can register for that here. Posted a link in the chat. And then also, if you're here listening to the sound of my voice, I have a early Black Friday launch for everyone with the code is live. So early Black Friday launch, code is live. And that's at marcobucciartstore.com. Okay, so when it comes to color, the thing that I want to focus on today, because there's so many aspects of color, right? You can do a million live chats, live streams, classes on color. The thing I want to focus on is understanding the color difference and the color choices between the light family and the shadow family. That's like the thing you have to understand when it comes to color. For example, obviously you can see some examples on screen here. Let's take a look at this garden scene. This is unfinished. I have to add more characters and stuff in here. But what we can see here is clearly it's a big, strong sunlight, mid-afternoon kind of thing. And we have these yellows in the light, and you can see that the light is largely in the same kind of family. As I scroll around here, you can just visually see it. I don't even need to bring up a color picker. We have like these strong yellows and oranges, right? Even some reds. Obviously, like this wood is like painted red, so it's got like a reddish color. And then the shadows are quite different. If we look here, again, this is unfinished. I'll keep working on this. Let's bring up a color picker. Actually, I'll just bring up this one. Let me just make sure. Okay. Sorry, I had my own stream on my other, and it was echoing the audio. Let's grab a brush and sample these shadow colors. There's nothing similar there's not much that seems to be similar with the light color. You have you have like these greens, it's very desaturated, whereas the light is very saturated in yellow. You've got some like reds, like I said, and oranges. You can even see here, like here's a vast difference. Here's like the railing of the deck right here. I'll zoom out a bit so you get some context. The railing of the deck is like this. This is actually based on my own patio I have outside, although slightly exaggerated. It's like this red stained wood, right? But then the shadow, if you look at the shadow, it's like look at that color. It's like oranges and greens and stuff. So that's what I'm talking about, where light and shadow families can often be very different choices. And I want to explain in general how that works and how you can go about studying that on your own. And I'll paint from a photograph here today. And all right, it's the same thing here, just to show you what we're talking about. Here's like this was the thumbnail of this live stream. Here's just like a castle scene, right? You can see it specifically in the castle itself. Look at the completely different colors. So here's like the sunlight is kind of coming in, causing those very same oranges and yellows and reds in this big dome here. And then On the shadow one, we have very different colors. Like there's blues, there's muted reds and oranges and slightly more saturated oranges. How does that all happen? Hey, Iris. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. And thanks. I see everyone here. Hi, Gabriel, Vanessa, Adnan, Daniel. Hey, folks, those are just the last people I see in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat, so feel free to type stuff there. We're probably on a slight delay, so. Vanessa says, how do you decide whether to favor light or shadow and saturation? That I'm going to talk. I will answer that in this live stream. Thanks, YOLO. Okay. Let's look at some other things just before we get to painting. I'll paint for about an hour. These are studies from my sketchbook. For those of you who maybe saw my Lightbox demo, like in person at Lightbox a few weeks ago, I showed some of my sketches from these sketchbooks. You can see how tiny these are because there's my fingers, right? There's my thumb holding the book. So these are very small, that big, just a few inches tall. This is the Moleskine sketchbook, the smallest Moleskine watercolor book they have. And the thing about learning color is you don't have to paint big. In fact, I would argue it's better to paint small, because you can get more done, because a small painting you can just finish physically faster. You can get more on the page faster, which is really important because color is all about relationships. You can never, I want to dissuade everyone about thinking about, how do I choose the right color? It's all about context. You can't tell what the right color is until you have multiple colors, specifically light and shadow colors, relating to each other. Small studies allow you to get to that quickly. I also have when I used to, I still paint a lot traditionally, but I used to do a lot of studies from animation. These are all Disney backgrounds. There's some Studio Ghibli in there too, like that one. Hopefully you guys can see this. Let me see if you can see this. Yeah, oh, there we go. Sorry. You can see some of these small studies on the camera. These are real tiny studies that are just there. They're gouache, just to capture color relationships. See if I could. There's the Emperor's New Groove, Tarzan, some photo stuff. There's Aladdin in the middle there. But small studies is the way to go, because that is how you can really, really understand color relationships quickly, because you can get them on the page quickly. Okay? I'm seeing all the nice messages from everyone. Hey folks, welcome to the live chat. So let's do a study. Let's paint and let's talk about this, okay? Here's the main thing. Ghost asks, how long did I take? Well, I've been painting for a while, so I'm pretty fast now, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But I don't want you to think that you have to do it in 20 minutes. You'll get faster as you work. I used to paint when I was earlier in my learning. I'm still learning, but when I was earlier in my learning, I would take 45 minutes to an hour maybe. Those gouache studies that I just showed you were those are 13 years old. I'm sure then, I can't even really remember, but probably an hour per study. These days I'm faster. I've got some reference here from, I was just kind of reminiscing on a vacation I took several years ago to the Algarve in Portugal. And I was kind of reminded that I think the best subject matter to paint to learn color is, first of all, on a sunny day, sunlight scene, rocks. Sun and rocks. Arizona's great. The Portuguese Algarve is beautiful for this. I've got some photo reference here. The reason why is because rocks, like these, like you see on screen, are big, chunky forms. They're pretty easy to draw. These shapes, rock shapes are very simple and big. This rock shape is oh, hang on. Where's my layers? This rock shape is this very big, obvious shape. It's not so hard to draw, right? And they tend to have very clear light and shadow. So Art by Kex says references are a must. When you're studying, yes, references are a must. And then the goal is to, when you study from a reference, you're downloading color information into your brain that you then pull out. So when I'm painting this image here is not from reference, it's from imagination. It is based on a location actually in my house. It's my backyard patio, but I added a bunch of stuff to it. When you're painting from reference, you then take the relationships you've learned, and that's what we're going to get to in a second here in the live chat, and you dump them on your imagination painting. Yeah, Bosch, I thought the best subject to paint was the white styrofoam sphere. That's a good one too. I see what you're doing there. Referencing the video. That was probably my best video in a while, by the way. That video was about value. Values are huge. I will talk about value here today, but it's impossible because it's impossible to separate color from value. You can only have color because of value. I'm going to make a new canvas. So check this out right away. And here's where right away a lot of people will, I think, make a unwise decision. Okay, file new. How big should the canvas be? I can tell you that doing student critiques for many years, so many people, like not in the 90 percentile of people, will submit work to me, and it's like 5,000 pixels wide, huge resolution, 6,000-7,000 pixels. Go the other way. Like, yes, you need that for print, but if you are just studying, watch this. I'm going to make this canvas like 600 by, I don't know, 800, small canvas, something like that. That's probably a bit too tall, so I will scale it back a little bit. Something like that. Small because it helps your brushes move faster and repeat less digitally. And it also is useful for speed. And you don't feel like you can zoom in to crazy levels and resolve detail. You want to ignore detail to as much as you can. In fact, I'll even make this canvas even smaller. I'll make the largest dimension 600 pixels, okay? So it's like if I were zoomed in 100%, it looks like that on my screen, and I'll work about like this. So let's talk about color now. Let's start painting here. Okay, I'm gonna use this as my main reference. And let's just, before I paint a single brush stroke, let's talk about what the color is doing here, okay? First of all, there are two families when you're painting sunlight, which I highly recommend you do because it's the clearest way to learn about how light works when you have the light and shadow. You have sunlight and shadow. So let's look first at the sunlight because the sunlight is the easiest one to understand. And it's the same here. I'll bring up this too. I call the sunlight a bully because it is so strong, the sunlight, that it essentially washes its color over everything. Anything that the sun hits is going to be similar in color because the sun is so strong, it bullies the colors to be like it. So going to my painting here, for example, first, grab my color picker. As I sample things in the light, I'm just sampling. Don't watch the painting, watch the color picker. I'm just sampling all over from trees to the wood to different surfaces. Can you see how the colors, specifically the hue, is like just pinned? It's like a wrestler that's been pinned in this area. I'll keep going. Here's more colors in light. These are just the sunlight colors, right? It's pinned. So I've got some greenish yellows, some oranges, some reds, but it's very close in color. So the sunlight, and it will always do this. It's very predictable. Let me go to this painting here. Now this painting, the sunlight is it's way less. The sun is kind of like off to the side. But let me just zoom in a little bit so everyone can see what I'm sampling. Watch this. As I'm sampling colors, I'm being very careful here. I got to be careful with my selection because the sun is pretty limited here. Can you see though that the hue, just like my own painting, they're stuck in this range here. This range of hue, yellows, oranges-ish, is very common because the sun is generally a warm source. The sun does change color throughout the day based on, its relationship to the earth. The sun changes color. You can look up the Fresnel chart. But the sun is always warmer than the environment. So you don't have to look up the Fresnel chart and say, the sun is like this color at noon and this color at 3 p.m. Don't worry about that. All you have to know is what the sun's temperature is relative to the environment. So the environment being like our blue sky. In these images here, or this image here, we have a blue sky. You can also consider the surroundings, like there's a lot of blue water in this one. So there's going to be a lot of blue coming down from the environment and bouncing around. So, Joe, I will get to bounce light as I start painting. And Baked Soda says, does the bullying affect the shadows and ambient light? No. So that's a good question. The sunlight, the bully effect of the sunlight really does not affect the shadows. Now that actually changes a little bit with bounce light. We will talk about that. But in general, the bully is only where the sun hits directly, because it's the full influence. Just to show you a little quick diagram, the sun in this painting, the sun comes in and strikes, the ground. That is the direct light hitting something directly. It bullies the color at its full strength. By the time the sunlight has bounced around and gets into the shadows here, that's a different conversation, and we will talk about it as we paint. Okay, so a lot of I see the questions, and I'll be answering these as I paint. And then, Pengu, I'll get to ambient occlusion as I go. Sarah says, is there a difference between studying from reference and studying in real life? Yes, there is actually quite a difference. And I recommend, at the very least, trying to make sure you have some life study in your repertoire, in your schedule. I kind of went really exaggerated on that. And for several years, I basically painted from life as much as I could, daily if possible. Now, it's not always possible. So I even had like a quota where I would have to paint from life like 3 or 4 times a week. Now, that's a lot. But if you can do that, the more you can paint from life, the better, because you are using your own eyes to filter color, and your own eyes are just better than a camera. But photo reference is great too, because a big thing a good photo will still capture great color information, but also when we paint, a lot of times we actually do want our paintings to feel like they've been captured by a lens. Like, so painting from a photo is good, because you will kind of learn also how cameras capture color. The brush I'm using is just going to be this very basic dry brush. Nothing special to it. It's just this, you can see the shape on the screen, hopefully. In Photoshop, it's just the dry brush. If in your painting app, any kind of acrylic brush will be fine. No smudging or anything. I'll use my smudge tool, and I'll tell you when I do that. Okay, so where's my blank canvas? Here it is. Let's just paint, and we'll talk, okay? And Chaos Lim says, is halftone a light family or shadow family? It's light family, Chaos, and I have a video with someone mentioned the styrofoam ball. Go on my YouTube channel, well, you're here already. Go to my archives and look for the thumbnail with I'm holding a styrofoam ball. Watch that video. That will explain halftones. Okay, so I almost always kill the white of the canvas, and I do it with different colors too. As you can see, some reds, some blues, whatever. The key is to stay neutral with it. Neutral meaning in this grayish desaturated range of the color spectrum. I like to use a middle value-ish, something middle to high. Just want to make sure, okay, yeah. Middle to high value, and get that canvas covered. Aikima says, do I recommend for bigger illustrations to have a small canvas like this as a thumbnail? Yes, the way I do it is, like when I paint my stuff like this, I actually start quite small. So this painting is now 2,600 pixels wide, which is not huge, but I'll start like half of that, say 1,300 pixels wide, on an illustration that I know I'm going to finish. And then as I work, I up-res. It's a very strange way to work. I don't think many people work this way, but every like half hour, I'll up-res it by 400 pixels, 500 pixels. Digital software is quite good at up-resing paintings, because paintings are, by definition, much lower fidelity than a photo, because we use big brushes. A photograph would get ruined if you do that, but a painting actually works surprisingly well with up-resing. Give it a try. It works for me anyway. Okay, so I'm going to lay in this drawing, and let's talk about that first, and then we'll get into color. The drawing is dead simple. For those just joining, I was saying earlier that I really recommend studying rocks in sunlight. Okay, rocks in sunlight. So wherever you can find that, like big rocks, like I used to look up Arizona as like my default mode. I would just look up pictures of like just places in Arizona, because I went to Arizona once and I was I was in heaven just studying there. I'm going to draw these basic forms, and it doesn't have to be exactly like the photograph. I'm looking at this rock here, which is just below the water line, but I'm going to change it so it's just a bit higher for now. Craig Mullins, nice. Oh yeah, Craig Mullins does that. Cool. I love Craig Mullins is one of my favorites. Yeah, Joe says Joe nails it. The rocks are very easy to draw. Exactly, just big chunks. You can almost just draw rectangles. Seriously. Now I'm looking at this big rock form here that kind of overlaps this one, and I like that overlap. It'll help us put get a bit of depth. Things stacking in front of other things, right? You guys can see my webcam, right? Okay. Thanks, Ikema. That's nice of you to say that. As I draw this, just on that note, anyone watching this has access to my early Black Friday stuff. It's the code LIVE on MarcoBucciArtStore.com. So put that in the chat again. MarcoBucciArtStore.com, code LIVE will get you early Black Friday deals. Okay. And that'll extend until actual Black Friday too. Okay, we have a beach here. The beach kind of sweeps around the scene a little bit. Constantaneous, is the color course on Aaron Blaze's website similar to Proco's? Not really. I think the Aaron Blaze class is it's my most recent class. I think it's one of my better classes. I was able to cover a lot more than just color. There's a lot of composition talk in that one. This is the course on creatureartteacher.com. It's only there. It's not on Proco. It's not even on my own store. It's only at Creature Art Teacher. I love those guys. We chatted a few years ago about doing a class, specific to their platform, and I was, of course, all in. That is a good one too. There's a lot of color talk on there as well, but there's more than that. Composition, traditional media, digital media, all that stuff. Okay, this is good. There's my drawing, right? Paulo, no, I don't speak Portuguese, unfortunately. Yeah, my main smudge tool is this brush from, I do remember where it's from, Kyle Webster used to make brushes for Adobe. Now he makes brushes for Procreate. This was from his gouache kit, I think. Zach, I have not really talked about AI stuff, and I guess I will, but not in this chat. I don't think this chat is quite the right platform for it, or the right time for it. So maybe I will weigh in at some point, but unfortunately not today, because that'll just derail the color talk. Skooma Joe, no, I have no preference. If you are watching my stuff, I am more than thankful. Okay, so folks, let's start laying in some light and shadow. Okay, first we need to think about value first. Value being the lights and darks. So what I'm going to do, I just have some handy brushes here. This is just the round brush set to multiply mode, which you can see up here. And with this brush, just with a neutral color and a neutral cold color, I'm going to lay in some shadows. Now, I'm keeping my drawing extremely loose, and these shadows pretty much encompass most of the rock, right? There's not a whole lot of rock that's in light. So I'm just kind of knocking this down in shadow. I'm not thinking about color right now. The only color I have chosen is this neutral blue, which is with a brush set to multiply mode. The reason I'm choosing a neutral cool color, it has nothing to do with this blue. Watch, it could be any blue, any purple blue, whatever. The only reason I'm choosing this is because it allows me then to start with the idea of that cooler atmosphere, which our sky always is. Remember, I'm going to say the word always. I never say the word always until now. Our atmosphere, the sky, is always cooler than the sun. There's never a time when the sun is cold and the sky is warm. It doesn't exist on Earth. So you can always, if you're painting sunlight, block your shadows in cooler, knowing that that is a general first step toward capturing a true light and color relationship. That is, the sunlight's going to be warmer and your shadows are going to be cooler. Now, we will see how that gets modified a little bit with bounce light, but ignore that for now. Essentially, the theory is the sun if I look at the photo here, the sun is a very warm source, throwing relatively warm rays in. When I say relatively, it's relative to the environment. The environment is this blue sky throwing comparatively cooler shadows in. Cooler tones in that affect the shadows. The blue sky does not affect the sunlight. Remember, the sunlight is a bully. You do not have to consider the blue sky in your sunlight. The sunlight is stronger than the skylight. It'll dominate it every time. That's why I call it a bully. It's like a wrestler that can pin it down. So when I block in the sun, here, I'm just continuing here blocking in my shadows. And there's some shadows here, some shadows along these rocks. There's a little rock up here. You notice I'm still in my neutral cools. By the way, I'm just painting with a little marker brush right now. Opacity, Tara says something about opacity. My multiply brush was set to like 50% opacity, that's right. Now I'm using this soft marker brush that's set to 100% opacity. When I use a multiply brush, yeah, my multiply brush is set to a 52% opacity. It's just a number that I like. But usually my brushes are 100%. Is dark purple a good way to add shadows to flesh? Yeah, for sure. But like all this stuff is the same with flesh tones, and flesh tones generally react in very similar ways. I'm gonna kind of focus on this landscape now, so like in future live streams, maybe I'll paint heads more. Okay. Wow, lots of stuff going on in the chat here. Do you have lessons on how to use Wacom tablets? Hook. Yes, I do have a digital painting for intro to digital painting class. It's on my store at marcobucciartstore.com. You can find an intro to digital painting. And use code LIVE for early Black Friday deal. Okay, let's add the sunlight, okay? So what color am I gonna pick for my sunlight? Well, first of all, I know it has to be lighter, right? And by the way, if you ever want to, go to filter, in Photoshop anyway, filter gallery, and I like to put this angled strokes filter on if I wanna really simplify. Other apps will have something similar to this. In Photoshop, it's called angled strokes. This will really help the color just get simplified down. It eliminates all the detail. So, I'll work this way just for a bit. Maybe I'll bring back the original painting, the original photo just a little bit. Okay, so sunlight has to be lighter in value, of course. I think we all know that. But what color do we pick? Well, once again, I like to pick a neutral-ish warm. So warms being anything in this typical range. The sunlight will usually pin the colors down in this hue range you're seeing here. Yellows, oranges, reds, right? You almost can't go wrong. I'm just gonna pick something in there. By the way, I'm not sampling from the photo. That's not allowed, because if you sample from the photo, it's kind of like tracing, but color. It's like you're tracing color. So don't sample from the photo. You will do yourself a disservice if you do that. Then May says, is this the way to get the color temperature right? Yes, what we are doing here, May is exactly that, color temperature. So I'm just blocking in sunlight. I'm gonna go a little darker with it. I still have a lot of room here. Going a little darker will help me. I always like to leave a bit of room. So I originally had the color up here, value up there. I didn't like that because it's really close to the maximum I can go. So I'm gonna go a bit darker, somewhere in here. And by the way, any hue in here is fine, as long as it's relatively warmer. Now, when I say relatively, which I'm gonna say a lot in this chat, that means the literal meaning is you have to have things relative to it. So I'm always gonna be bouncing back and forth from light to shadow, light to shadow. Someone asked about my brushes. I share all my favorite brushes with my courses. So if anyone has my courses, I also have my brush pack. It's on my store as well, and I'm working on a second brush pack too. Sketches and Scrubs ask about changing process with digital and traditional. It doesn't change. My process is the same for both, and that's because I was trained traditionally. Okay, let's lay in a sky. This is important. Let's get the sky in, because the sky is the atmosphere, is like the physical presence of our atmosphere. That's what our sky, that's why we see blue in the sky. It's like an atmospheric effect. So I'm going to get in the sky. Now, I have a whole YouTube video on painting skies, so if you want exact colors, you can check out that video. It wouldn't make sense for me to repeat that info now. But in general, skies are on this side of blue. Can you see the color picker here? In general, skies are on the cyan side of blue, not the purple side of blue. So I'll go on that side, and as long as you're kind of within this range, you're going to get something of a realistic sky color. But here's the key: skies get lighter and more cyanish as they get closer to the horizon. So I'm scribbling that in. And at the horizon, as you can see in the photograph, they can get warmer. So I am actually going to go to the reds here, but gray it off. So it's kind of like this sort of thing. Now it's a bit aggressive. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just sample this and mix it in, then sample the result. Maybe something like this. I'll block this in. Make sure your horizon lines are straight. Sergio, no, Krita does not load Photoshop brushes, unfortunately. My brushes work in Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, and Photoshop. That's just a technical limitation, so I apologize. Krita, by the way, though, has great built-in brushes. I really enjoy working with Krita, which is probably the software I would use, by the way. If I hadn't learned Photoshop in 1997, I'm not young anymore, so I'm stuck in my ways. I've got the old man syndrome where I've been using Photoshop for like 30 years, more than 30 years. Wait, I said, no, what's that? Not 30 years yet. Anyway, I'm so used to it that I hold my nose and pay the subscription. I maybe one day will switch, and if I do switch, it'll be Krita. Okay. Now, someone says Clip Studio Paint is on sale right now. Nice. I love Clip Studio. I've done some videos using Clip Studio on my channel. Okay, let's get in some more blues for the water. Now, water is interesting. A lot of people ask me about water, which is why I painted it. I'm going to paint it here. Yeah, I love Clip Studio, Pengu. I have done several YouTube videos using it, and I like it. I can't say I use it regularly though, but I think it's great. It's got some nice animation stuff too. Water being a reflection of the sky essentially is also going to be generally in the more cyan type of blues. The color of water can change based on the type of water you're painting. If it's a saltwater ocean versus like lake water, it can change, but in general you're going to be sort of on this side of blue again. And water generally gets darker the further back it goes to the horizon. So as I lay this in, this is obviously the ocean, so it's got a nice, and it's pretty shallow too, which means there is going to be a nice sense of color changing. Now, let's talk about color changing, okay? Color changing and saturation. Sergio, moonlight demo. You know what? I won't be able to do that today, but maybe I'll save it for a YouTube video, like a moonlight painting. Okay, when you change color and you're thinking about saturation, here's my rule of thumb. If the colors are next door neighbors, like this, if you see I'm changing hues on my color picker here. If they're next door neighbors, and it could be anywhere, it could be like from purple to reddish purple, or this blue to like the purple blue, or this green to a, lemon yellow green. If they are next door neighbors, you can keep saturation basically the same. That nature will do that too. It's when you are changing colors over a large degree, like from, we'd already talked about light and shadow family, from like a warm light family to a cooler shadow family. That is when you have to consider neutralizing colors. I'm going to talk about that more as I paint, okay? Instead of just talking theoretically now, let me paint it and you'll see. So I do want to make sure that I finish this study in the next 40 minutes or so. Hannah asks about layers. Now, this is again me being a traditional painter. I don't use layers really, but if I did, I would. I mean, there's so many strategies for using layers. I guess you could separate them via light and shadow. Sometimes I separate objects. If I'm dealing with a client, for example, that may give me any kind of revision, I'll usually separate objects. But I really especially in the context of this live chat here, I really recommend painting on one layer, because it's just, these are just studies for you, right? There's no real reason to use layers if you just get out brushes and just start painting. You know, this is digital, right? We could paint over anything. So I want to get in some more shadows here. Now watch this. Here's the thing that I haven't mentioned yet that is super important. When you are evaluating color, you want to make sure that you have colors right next to each other. So in this painting here, hi Anya. Is it the Anya? I don't know. Anya, sorry. As in magma Anya? Okay. When you are painting color, you want to have colors right next to each other so you can evaluate warms and cools, okay? I want to make sure that I have water up against sunlight. You know what, let me get back this image here just so we can see the full res. I want to have water up against sunlight, up against the shadow of the background cliff. So here's water, here's sunlight, here's shadow, right? They're connected. They are right up against each other. That allows me to see it. If you like to draw lines, like do a line drawing before you paint, notice I did not do that. Well, I kind of did, but I used like a weird red line. If you use black lines, try and erase those lines, or like hide the layer or paint over the lines, because the lines will prevent you from optimally evaluating your colors, because lines are like dark things that separate things, right? Lines are great. I love line art, but painting lines can disrupt your ability to judge a painting because they disconnect the color. Okay, let's keep blocking this in. I'm gonna get out this kind of crazy brush that makes weird patterns, because these rocks have a lot of weird patterns. So I'm just using it to quickly find, you know, a pleasing distribution maybe of big, medium, small shapes. Really, I'm just trying to match the reference here. I'm a big fan of finding reference that I like. Sounds trite, but like find reference that you think is beautiful already, and then study from it. I have had a lot of students who choose reference that is like really complicated and like big forest scenes with leaves on the ground. Pick something like this for those just joining. The best thing to study, in my opinion, for learning color: rocks in sunlight. Simple, rocks in sunlight. You'll get easy to draw stuff with all the color information you could shake a stick at. For those also joining, you can follow the link on screen to, I'll paste it on screen again. If you follow this link, you'll get access to the replay, because I think this will go unlisted after. And you can use code LIVE on the store for early Black Friday stuff, because I have a lot of classes on color and things like that. Okay, let's continue here. It's always, I'm always reminded of that I paint slower when I'm also talking, but it's also a pleasure just to be here talking, of course. Notice these subtle changes in color that I'm using in the water are already creating a general kind of appeal. Like they look, when color vibrates, when color moves as it goes, it's interesting to look at. You notice like on here, the color is very rarely just the same. It's always moving around. If you look at like the sunlight, right? It's changing just little bits. These are next door neighbors of color, so that just the saturation can stay, but just the hue kind of shifts a little bit. I call those color vibrations, but I do it everywhere. Like if you look at the table here, you could see it's the same thing. These colors are just changing, just little bits. Like let me sample this. You've got this like this orange versus, you know, a slightly less saturated version of itself. You know, they move around in hue a little bit. Change that color up. And when you do it, when you do change your color, little micro changes, not big changes. Yeah, Iris knows it's hard to paint and talk. Yeah. Okay, that is true. All right, but let's keep going here. Okay, my shadows are starting to look a little drab, but that's fine. That's just the block in. Now it's time to start thinking about bounce light and ambient light. So ambient light comes down from the sky, and like I've already established, it's this kind of bluish light coming down from the sky. But also that sun is warm. We're saying there's a warm sun coming in, right? And that warm sun bounces off other warm things. For example, here in the photograph, the sunlight comes in. It's going to strike the beach, which is, this earthy colored sand, right? Which is kind of warm. And it's going to bounce up. It's going to start bouncing. Also, these rocks. The sun is going to hit these rocks, which are probably generally a kind of warmish color as well. And there's going to be a lot of warm bounce light as well. Noel says, how often do I stream? Not very often, but I plan to do more streams. So hopefully this will be the first to usher in more live streaming content, because I really do enjoy streaming. Okay, so I'm going to pick my block in color. Remember, it was just a cooler neutral, right? That's how I started. So what I'm going to do now is think about the color blue of the sky, which is why I love painting rocks, because that blue sky is going to kind of reliably come down and impart some of its blue into the shadows. So what I'm going to do here, the thing about starting neutral is you have kind of free reign to move a lot in color if you have a neutral starting point, okay? So I'm going to move, I'll sample my block in, I'm going to move all the way down toward the blues, anywhere in here, it doesn't matter, as long as it's kind of in the blues. I'm going to go a bit more saturated, just a little bit of a move out, and then I will start blocking this in. And notice how the color fits. It fits because I've already established the value, so I know where the value goes. I know what the value is already. It's just the sunlight is light, the shadows are darker, and now I can just start scumbling in. I think someone asked this in the chat. Scumbling is like directional scribbling. It looks like this. I paint like that a lot. Johnny says, can you share the link to your classes? Yes, it's just here, marcobucciartstore.com. Code live will get you early Black Friday deals. And what is blue sky? Everyone's talking about blue sky. Can someone tell me what blue sky is? I'm sure I should be on it, but I don't know what it is. I will wait in the chat. Now, let me keep blocking in these colors. You notice as I start blocking in these colors, the colors are starting to jump to life. Let me just resize this a little bit. Oh, it's a better Twitter. Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. Then I should definitely be on Blue Sky, because I've been on Twitter since 2009. And I used to love, we're in the same boat, I'm sure. I used to love Twitter, and now Twitter is just a source of almost depression. I don't like Twitter anymore. So I will probably move out of there. Yeah, blue sky sounds great. Okay, cool. Obviously the rocks get quite dark here. Someone asked about ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is a value within the shadow. It's the tightest crevices. See this area here? This is ambient occlusion. As the rock turns under, I'm sure there's also some stains from the water on there, but as the rock turns under, it's very difficult for light to get in there. That's called ambient occlusion. Oh, that's right. Twitter is starting to feed the AI machine too, isn't it? Yeah, I got to get off there. Johnny, if you go to marcobucciartstore.com, it should be the main store. Oh, the link I posted, sorry, the link I posted on the chat registers you for the replay of this live stream because I think it will become unlisted. But if you just go to marcobucciartstore.com, that's my main store. Sorry. I had the URL for the replay in my clipboard, I guess. And the beach casts reflected light. Yeah, True MG says, yeah, the beach will cast reflected light onto the rock, which I have not dealt with yet. I will get there. Right now I'm just laying in some quick ambient occlusion. And while I'm here, let's finish this water. This water gets a lot lighter. As you can start seeing through water to the ground underneath, you will start getting the influence of warmth because the sand is warm, right? So as that warm sand, anyone who's mixed traditional colors knows this, as you mix a yellowish warm with a blue, what do you get? Green. So in real life, we get this greenish, starting to almost get a greenish look to the water that is see-through and close to the land below. When water is deeper, you lose that because the land has no effect on the color anymore. And I totally know I'm missing a rock face over here. Let's put it in. Not that it matters that I have to copy the reference, but let's put it in because it helps break up some shapes, I think. And let's just note that there's some ambient occlusion down there. What paints do I use to study still life? I like to use watercolor and gouache. That's my favorite medium for painting from life. I assume that's what you mean by still life. Sometimes, typically still life also refers to like, setting up oranges and apples and like a scene in front of you as a still life. I've done that, but generally my still life is nature. Go outside and paint something. But I've also set up, proper still lives as well. Okay, let's get that color in here. Notice colors can be big and chunky. You do not have to, definitely don't go in here and start thinking about, say you can see like rocks under the water. Don't worry about that. It's a detail that's just not important. You're looking for big chunks. For those who missed it, I like to go up to Filter Gallery in Photoshop and turn on this angled strokes filter. This is what I want to study. Other painting apps will have similar filters, but in Photoshop it's called angled strokes. And sometimes I'll just bring back the original photograph a little bit. By the way, I don't know who took this photo, so I apologize for the lack of credit. I just Googled Portuguese Algarve, which is where I went on vacation several years ago, and I loved it. J. Julinson, yep, the tips are happening right now about water as I go. You can go back in the chat, go back in the live stream. I talked about some color shifts, and currently we're talking about what it kind of looks like when water gets shallower, specifically salt water, which tends to have a slightly different color. Now, I'm going to switch to my smudge tool. Right up against the land here, we are going to get some actual greeny greens as the water is so shallow at this point that we can see through it. And don't forget these big, very whites, like the whitest thing in your painting, these very white crests of the wave as the wave goes up into the land. Okay, let's get the beach in. I don't have the beach color in. The sand is, again, thinking about that sunlight bully, the sand color is not going to be much different than the rock colors because the sun is the bully, like we already kind of went over. As Thrino says, what do I cover in my book? For those who don't know, I have a book that just came out this week, maybe last week. It's called Debt-Free Art Degree, Foundations in Drawing. It is a book about, foundations in drawing. It's for beginners to intermediates, and it is all the foundations in order that I think you need to know to propel your art in any direction you want. Whether you want to draw like comics or paint like this, the backbone of drawing is the most important thing you need. And my book is my attempt at giving you the fundamentals the way I learned them. Thanks, Pebbles. Pebbles, yeah. Thank you. It was that book was about a year in the making. It was a big project. The publisher approached me a little over a year ago, they found my YouTube channel and asked if I would have any interest in kind of like synthesizing that kind of stuff into a book. And another question I get about the book is like, is the book covered in any of my classes and videos? And like, yes, a little bit, but the book is bigger. Abude is asking about Rebel. I have not tried Rebel, I have to admit. I think I would love it. In fact, there was even a time a few years ago where the Rebel people contacted me about like doing the official tutorials for the software, and I just didn't have the time. But I'm pretty sure I would love it. Okay, let's get some more bluish reflected light now into these rocks. Because again, now that I have this very saturated water, the rocks are starting to look gray. And that's all because of the color relativity, right? So I have room now, because like look at the difference here. Here's my water and here's the rock. See the saturation jump? I can bring these together because that's what bounce light does. The sun bounces off its surroundings. I'll just draw it here. The sun is going to like bounce off surroundings and bounce up. And when the sun bounces off something, it inherits its color a little bit. And the more saturated, here's the rule of thumb, the more saturated the color of what the sun hits, the more saturated that bounce light's going to be. It's a very simple calculation. So this is very saturated water, pretty saturated water. In fact, let me just saturate the whole image a bit more. I'm going to, I always sample where I'm at. I sample the place I'm at with my blues, and I'll just increase it a little bit. Maybe go down toward the water color a little bit more, and I'll start putting that in, maybe a little bit more. So I'm always building. Tenton Lazaro, this probably will become unlisted soon. You can sign up for the replay. There's a link above in the chat. I want to do more of these like just impromptu classes. But yeah, you can sign up for the replay. And if you're at marcobucciartstore.com, you can use code live for early Black Friday stuff. Okay. Here's a little trick I do sometimes. Go to layers, make a new layer. So if someone asked about layers, this is the time where I will use layers. Watch this. I like to make a new layer. In Photoshop, I add a stroke to it. You could do this in any software. A very thin stroke, maybe 2. Give it like a, I don't know, neutral warm color with low opacity. So basically what that does, can you see that? It adds like this dark stroke to it. This is a way to, maybe a bit less than that. This is a little layer trick I use sometimes. Maybe, yeah, lower opacity. It just adds a tiny little something to the brush strokes. It's a bit, it can get obnoxious quickly, so be careful. But sometimes I'll just paint with this a little bit. It almost like gives you the illusion of detail for free. You know, a good place to use it might be some of the vegetation on the rocks. So watch this. I will go sample my shadows. Now the vegetation is darker, and because I'm neutral, see that neutral color? I have permission just to like go down to the greens. So like I can just go down here and start scumbling in these things, and see it starts looking like vegetation. Neutral colors are the key to this. You could not, if my color was here, this green, it's not going to work. It's too saturated. It's not going to look natural. It's much better when you're studying color to keep your colors in the grays, in the desaturated neutral range, because you're much more free at that point to change colors. You know, I do a lot of student critiques, as you guys probably know. I'm sure some of you here have gotten critiques from me from various classes or whatever. You'll know that a lot of times I talk about neutralizing colors and adding grays to the base of your painting. When I build a painting like this, you notice that I start fairly neutral and I only add saturation as I go. I'm catching up with the chat. Thanks, folks. See some kind words there. Is the sand saturated? Let's see. I'll talk about the bounce more. For those asking about my live streaming habits, I've only live streamed a few times. You can catch, I've done like a few on Proco's channel over the years. You can catch those. And there are a few on my channel as well. I'm going to switch back to my regular layer. And let's talk about the warm bounce now, because I have not done that. There's a few more sunlit spots, by the way, coming in here on the rock. So I'm just going to scumble this in. Also, this rock face I added needs sunlight. Okay. Flipping the painting around helps. Now it needs more bounce. It is missing more bounce. So I'm going to sample, and here's another little trick. As you progress further in depth, as that depth increases, your shadows get lighter and bluer. So if I sample my shadow here, I can get lighter and even more blue, and sometimes even more toward the cyan. Atmospheric perspective generally takes on a cyanish tinge. And I'm just pressing very lightly on my tablet with these like scumbly strokes. I'm getting some of these very light blues in the more distant rocks. And here's a nice thing too. Just pressing lightly allows your colors to mix on the canvas, right? So even if you get the color wrong, like if I got this color, this is not the right color if I press 100%. But if I press, like it is going in the right direction, I've just gone too far. If I just press lightly, very lightly in this case, you know, it can mix on the painting and it can totally work. This is very similar to traditional techniques where you're often mixing pigment on the painting. Meme, the replay link, I believe you'll have to, because it's going to be unlisted. Everyone who signs up here, I'll paste in the chat, will get a replay link right here. What tablet am I using? I'm just using a Wacom Pro. Can I show it in the chat? Let's see. This is the Wacom Intuos Pro Large. Okay, let's keep going here because there's some shadows to get in. Let's get in these shadows. And these rocks really change value as they plummet downward. And there is this beautiful lost edge between the rocks and their shadows. I've got my multiply brush out. Yeah, Tony Doots. Yeah, that comment is correct. The rock in the background is indeed cooler due to atmospheric perspective. So I mentioned this a few minutes ago. I'll say it again because it bears repeating. Atmospheric perspective will primarily make your shadows lighter and cooler. It'll affect the lights too, by the way. But what it'll do for the lights, it'll make the lights darker and also cooler. So everything gets cooler, which is why, like, if you see a very distant mountain, it's just like a shape of blue. Everything gets cooler and values crushed together. So shadows are more aggressively impacted. Shadows get a lot lighter and relatively a lot cooler. Light will get a little bit darker and cooler, a little bit cooler. But make the shadows be the first to be affected. And this rock, this particular rock, I can zoom in a bit here. This rock in the distance is not that far in the distance. Obviously, the further distance you go, the more effect the atmosphere has, right? Okay. Let's get in some warm bounce. We've been talking about bounce light, and I have not gotten any warm bounce. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to get my lovely little round brush here. This is just the basic round brush, although it has wet edges turned on. Natnail, you change pressure sensitivity and like brush settings. Every app will be different, but in Photoshop, it's just in Photoshop, you bring up this screen and go to transfer and turn on pen pressure. That's opacity, but that's just Photoshop. Every app will be different. Okay, so as I always do, I sample where I'm at in the shadows, and I know that it's bounce light, so it's got to be a bit lighter, right? The light is bouncing into the shadow, so it gets lighter because it's light, and a bit warmer. Now, warmer, which hue though? Well, that's pretty simple. It's like I said with the water, it just kind of takes on the hue that it's bouncing off. So it's bouncing off this like, you know, what earthy colored sand. I don't even know what color that is. A muted orange maybe. So I'll go to like the oranges, which I think is the sand color. I'll get a bit lighter. And I'll start putting this in. Someone says about that my smudge tool. The smudge tool, if you turn on finger painting, I'll do it now. Watch this. I can paint with the smudge tool using the finger painting option. If you don't have finger painting turned on in Photoshop, it just smudges what's already there. If you have finger painting, it'll respect the color that you have selected. Excuse me. Thanks, Rajnik. That's funny and also kind. If anything, I owe the color wheel. I actually have not brought a color wheel up today. I usually do, but I wanted to just try it, talking about it differently. If you watch my Proco streams or even in my classes, I use the color wheel a lot. Today, I wanted to try it just talking with just the good old color picker here. So we are adding in this warm bounce, right? Let me flatten this down. Here we go. Clip Studio should have an equivalent function. It's a very good piece of software. There is some light, some tiny bits of light sneaking in here. It's very beautiful. Now, I have completely ignored these rocks over here. They are bathed in sunlight, so, you know, the bully light. I'm just going to choose these bullied colors that I talked about right in the beginning of the chat. And okay, let's keep going into I also did say, by the way, folks, that I jump around a lot. I will try and narrate my jumping. I want to paint these shadows in these rocks. See how warm they are? That's because light is bouncing, coming in from the sun, bouncing off the beach, and hitting these rocks that are right up close to it. It's just the same as this area here. It's the same as this. It's just this rock is a little bit further away from the sand. The light has to bounce all the way up there, which it will do, but it's going to be a little less orange than a little less warm than here, because here those rocks are very close to the beach. So that that bounce light is going to be strong enough there that it will dominate the blue. That sun is such a strong bully that in short distances of bounce, even the bounce light will dominate the blue sky. In light, I mentioned this earlier in the stream, the light, when sunlight hits something directly, you don't even have to consider the blue sky. The sun will just be too dominant. In shadow, you have to, when you're painting warm bounce light from the sun, you have to consider the proximity, how much distance is between the object in shadow and the bounce light. Deborah, software recommendation for a beginner digital painter. Krita, simple answer. Procreate as well. If you're using an iPad, Procreate is great. Krita though, and Procreate is super inexpensive. Krita is free and can do everything. Like to me, it's kind of a hands down easy decision. And then of course, if you're looking for more functionality, I would go CSP, Clip Studio Paint. Procreate again is great for all levels. I know professional artists who, use Procreate. By the way, I mentioned this earlier, I only use Photoshop, folks, because I have been using Photoshop since 1996. Maybe even 1996, I think, is when I first got Photoshop. So, I just know Photoshop so well. And I've tried over the years to switch, because I don't love Adobe these days. But, it's like painting with my left hand. I'm just so used to Photoshop that currently I'm kind of feel like I'm stuck with it, but one day that'll change. Okay, there has got to be some warm light in these back rocks, because this back rock is too cold overall. Now, it should be cold up here. The shadows, should be cold here because of the water. But by the time we get close to that sand, that light's going to bounce. So let's, as I always do, sample the shadows. Remember, here's the key. I'm in the neutrals. Boom, I can warp over to this color. As long as you're in the neutrals, you can warp. Do people know my theory of warping? Let me quickly, this is the one area where I should bring up a color wheel. Here's a color wheel. This warp effect. Okay, color wheel, right? The reason you are free to move in the grays is if you have a neutral color here, right? All of these colors, every color, shares the neutrals. By the time you're in pure gray, every color shares that. So if you are in a neutral, it's very easy to jump from one to the other and back because they all are so close together. Simple as that. So if I'm here or wherever, I can easily just jump there. If you are, that is not true though. If you're here, you can't just jump here. That's too far. You will understand the limits of the jumping and the warping with more paint. With more painting experience. I can't like definitively tell you how far is too far. And obviously art is rife with rules to break. So I would never say that these are rules, but just painting from life a lot. I understand this from what nature does. By the way, the greens in sunlight, there is some vegetation there in sunlight. I've picked a bullied sunlight color somewhere in the upper yellows here, and I will just simply dot in some greens in light, and the bully sunlight effect comes through once again, and they fit. Oh yes, I was warming up this background rock shadow. Okay, so I'll sample where I'm at. That led me to the color wheel thing, right? I've got a neutral purple. I want that to feel warmer. So I'm in neutrals. I can just freely do that. It's like a cheat code. And into the, sandy color. I don't know what color sand is. That. And then a bit lighter and a bit more saturated. Yeah, Rebel apparently, as Smacko says here, Rebel apparently does really well with realistic paint simulation and brush simulation. I will definitely want to check that out. Yeah. Now, I am also of the mind that I love what Rebel is doing, but if you want realistic brushes and paint, use traditional. I really think that adding traditional to your repertoire is huge. It can do wonders for you because you are physically interacting with color. Yeah, drawing with Mussy. Yes, I have used, I do have a mixer brush preset here. This one. This is my mixer brush. I like it, yeah, I like it. But this actually relates to what I was just saying. Like, typically, like my goal in painting is not to mimic the behavior of traditional. I will mimic the process of traditional because that's how I think about painting. I came up traditionally, so like I'll paint on one layer, I'll paint opaquely, I'll paint as if it were traditional, but I'm not, ironically, that interested in mimicking the behavior of paint because to me, digital is just a different beast. So I will use digital as, I'm happy to use digital brushes as they are. I generally am not looking for the additional benefit of the additional feature of it mimicking traditional. However, this is not me crapping on it. I think it's great when brushes and apps do that. It's just, it's not quite something that I have generally looked for whatever reason. Probably because, again, I've gotten so used to what digital does. Because I started digital painting in like 2002, 2001. Back then, there was no mixer brush, things like that. So like I learned digital with its basic tool set. And it's amazing. Anyone here who's my age, which is in your 40s, will kind of know what it feels like to default back to the way you learned something 20 years ago, which is kind of what I do. For better or worse. It's amazing. I always, people show me new stuff and I'm like, wow, how have I not heard about this? And it's all stuff that like I probably would have heard of if I were 20 years younger, when I was a bit more following the happenings of the world. I guess what I'm saying is as I've gotten older, I've gotten more stagnant. But always still learning about painting too. By the way, the water has soft little reflections, like direct reflections of the sun. These are going to be tiny little, very, very white, shimmery bits. I've got this scattery brush. Terry asks about my creativity in the campfire book. You know what? I actually just changed storefronts, and my new store, like if you go to marcobucciartstore.com, you won't find physical products there anymore. I have never been real good about shipping, so I've kind of stopped for now, but if you email me, I'll see if I can get you one. We can do like a PayPal or something. For those wondering, if you go to, I'll put it in the chat, marcobucciartstore.com. If you go there, it's my art store. use code live for early Black Friday deals with a Z. Deals. Okay. Sometimes, do I have a picture of this? Do I have a picture of this? No. Sometimes when water washes up onto a beach, you know what? Let me just quickly search for it. Portugal. It gets cooler. The water will cause the sand to get cooler. I'm just looking on my other screen. Yeah, here's one. Let me copy and paste this in. There. Okay. See, as water has washed up onto this beach, the water causes the sand to be reflective, and it will reflect the sky. Bernard, yes, I still do the watercolor and white gouache paintings in my book. I have switched from Moleskine. I just buy, either I'll go to a craft paper store and buy like custom paper, and I just experiment, or my default paper now is Strathmore paper. I'm not sponsored by them, although I have been in the past, but not now. I love Strathmore paper. But equally, I will go to an art store or art store or craft paper store. I used to live in Munich in Germany, and there was this amazing craft paper store that had all this amazing heavyweight paper. I would, do I have one here? No. I would buy the paper and just go to a local print shop and get them to bind it. I'd get a spiral binding, and it was awesome. I used to love painting on that stuff. Okay. Yeah, so you might get some of these blues. I'm scumbling like this. You might get some of these blues reflecting onto the beach surface. And you'll also get the warmth of the sand playing into it as well. So you're mixing, again, because I'm neutral here, I can kind of jump. And I can scumble and scribble, and the shadows of the rocks might play into the reflection as well. Yeah, it's really cool to see the chat so active, folks. Thank you. This is great. I didn't know if I'd be coming into a situation where I'm like doing all the talking, but I love that a lot of people are helping each other out, chiming in, asking questions. Where's my layers here? Let's go back to my reference. Okay. Just modifying some of the geometry of this rock here, meaning like the form, how it's shaped. You notice that it's not like this shadow is blue and this shadow is warm. It's not duotone like that. Oh, jazz kraken. Scumbling is like strokes like this. Directional scribbling is scumbling. It's a traditional painting technique. It helps with it basically helps broken color, which is kind of like how I paint, and also it helps with shape design. Because if I scumble, I can control my shape a little better. Scribbling is like this. This is scribbling, which has a place. You could scribble, say, for the foliage maybe, although maybe even not, because foliage would grow in patterns, right? I tend to favor scumbling over scribbling, but they are of the same family. Thanks, Adrian. Adrian, yeah. Okay. It means a lot to me that that people are inspired by the lessons and the painting, and this is inspiring for me too. You know, I basically sit alone in a room here, trying to do my work, and I love every time I live stream. Where's my brushes? Oh, here. Every time I live stream, I'm always like, why don't I do this more? So hopefully that'll be a reminder for me to do this more. These background lights need to be darker and a bit cooler. So sometimes when I go with atmospheric perspective on lights, I get a bit redder. Like my version of cooler is going redder. Because red, like if you think of like your warm side of the color picker, which is here, and you are moving toward the cools, well, red is along the way, right? So if I go a bit redder, this represents light getting cooler. Now, light gets cooler because yellows are the first, yellow is the first hue to leave the spectrum with distance. I don't know why that is. I'm sure it's related to the wavelength of yellow. the scientific wavelength of it. So I can't quite explain to you why. Maybe someone in the chat can. But as light goes in the distance, you'll lose the yellows, leaving behind, typically, reds. So it's just this is a subtle tweak, but you can get slightly redder colors here in the shadows. By the way, I'm going to tell you a little digital cheat that I would be lying if I said I didn't use sometimes. Okay, you want to see how to cheat? Go to your layers. You know, every time I'm, Daily Doodle, is red cooler than yellow? Remember, it's all relative. Because in this paint, it all depends on the direction you're moving. Because in sunlight, you're typically dealing with like the sunlight bullies colors to this range, as we discussed earlier in the chat. And the environment is here. That means that reds are indeed along the way to cools. So I would say, as a very blanket statement, yes, in this painting, red is cooler than yellow, but red can still be very warm if it's saturated. Like if I were to paint these reds in shadow, it's too red. But if I desaturate that red, which means I'm making it cooler because I'm bringing it closer to gray, which brings it closer to blue, suddenly that red can be a cooler color. So you have to factor in your level of saturation as well. And this is how you can get a whole tapestry. Like I can get a whole tapestry of colors going, which I already have, in the shadows here. Okay, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the digital trick. Okay, duplicate your layer. And in Photoshop, other apps have similar. I just go to auto color, and it does this. Now, I don't like that. But what I can sometimes do is make a layer mask, invert the layer mask so nothing happens. But now that I have a layer mask there, I can get like an airbrush and paint white and reveal the effect. So I might want to use it. I kind of scribble it around and just kind of see like, you know, I don't know. It adds a little bit of variety that maybe I didn't have before. It's certainly not a way to fix anything. Photoshop is dumb. Like auto color, it doesn't know what it's doing. It's employing some algorithm. And I just am using it in areas where I think it looks good. So ultimately, it's still based on your own aesthetics. But every now and then, I'm sure we can relate. Everyone here can relate. You're painting. You kind of get tired of, you get fatigued, like visual fatigue of what you're doing. I find that anything I can do to allow the software to just give me a visual shakeup, I do it. I don't use AI though. I'll never use that. But this Photoshop actually doesn't even have AI. This is Photoshop. This is 2018 Photoshop. I refuse to upgrade. Yeah, Joe, sometimes the auto color version is like better everywhere. In this case, I think it's better. I think it adds a bit of depth to the shadows. So I'm putting it in. So if you see my layers, this is what the difference is. So it has come into play here and there. Okay. Like also, by the way, like feel free to go into brightness contrast and like see what this does for you. Remember, it's digital. It's okay to use digital tools in your digital painting. Okay. To make sure you don't lose focus on modeling values when all different. Oh yeah, Punch Ham asks about. That's all. Not losing your modeling is all about separation of light and shadow. That's all it is. So as I am painting this sunlight in the rock, I am making sure that my sunlight does not ever, my sunlight shapes do not ever go away. They are still separate from the light. Sorry, the sun is still separate from the shadow. That provides the modeling that you're talking about. And for those who have been here in the chat, I'm going to repeat myself. The subject I recommend you paint, rocks in sunlight. Okay, rocks in sunlight. That is the subject to paint. Because rocks, like big rocks like this, rocks are very easy to draw. By the way, this is the Portuguese Algarve area. If you want to just search reference that I personally approve of, here I'll put it, Portugal Algarve. find reference of that. It's almost guaranteed to give you some good stuff to paint from. Big rocks like this are easy to draw. They attract a lot of bounce light colors because they're big forms. You know, water is nice too because water can bounce up to them. I used to paint a lot of like Arizona type scenery, the Midwest area. Scott Christensen, who was an artist I did a workshop with, he lives up in the Teton Valley in Idaho / Wyoming. A lot of good plein air painters up in that area because the Tetons are just incredible, very friendly for painting. I want a kind of a neutral bounce here, meaning just a little bit warmer than those blues, but not much. And we are almost done here, folks. We'll wrap up in 10 minutes or so. Yes, rocks in sun, Deborah. That's exactly right. Iris Mod, how would you translate your layering to watercolor? That's a good question. My simple answer is, I mean, I don't really have a intelligent answer for you. You got to start light and go darker, but I know you already know that. You have to plan ahead more. And what I would do is I would start, you have to go backwards. In this painting, I started darker and went lighter for my bounce light, which is an opaque way of painting. In watercolor, I would start light with my lightest bounce colors and then go darker. But easier said than done, I know. For any watercolorist out there, like, you know how difficult that medium is. By the way, though, just to plug in another one of my classes, over at creatureartteacher.com, I have a watercolor demo. It's a big, long demo. Also on my own store, Marco Bucci Art Store, I have several videos where I recorded myself plein air painting in watercolor. But at Creature Art Teacher, I've got a pretty thorough watercolor tutorial. And it's coupled with, there's digital demos too. So it's kind of got everything. These days, I've done so many classes that they're all over the place. But if you go to my store at Marco Bucci Art Store, www.marcobucciartstore.com, use the code LIVE and you get early Black Friday access. Okay. Was there a... Yeah, we're going to wrap this up. What needs to be done? I'm not even sure. Let's see. We are just going to add a bit more variety here to the sand colors. And by the way, like, this is maybe a question that I'm just bringing up on my own here. How do you know when you're done? You're finished your study. Your study is finished when you've captured the relationships of color temperature, which I had half hour ago. You know, plein air is great. That is painting directly from life, because the light is not going to stay for you. It's going to move. So plein air forces you to get those relationships in fast, because the light's going to go. So you got to act fast. You will learn when plein air painting what to focus on. And that's all about the relationships of light and shadow in general. So I recommend everyone get outside with their traditional media, if at all possible. And in digital, you have the kind of unfortunate luxury of unlimited time. You know, you could save this and work on it tomorrow, whatever. That is a blessing and a curse, because it doesn't impress upon you any urgency. And urgency is important, I think, because it will force you to make reactions. It's like being in a dance or a fight, maybe. You're forced to react. With digital, you're not forced to react. So yes, I paint outside as often as I can. I used to paint outside, like back when I didn't have kids or wasn't married. I would paint outside like 4 or 5 times a week. Like, I would be super serious about it. And I have so many sketchbooks full of plein air. These days, it's admittedly much less. But now it's like, I don't know, every month, like once a month maybe. Not a lot, but still enough to, you know, keep the muscles worked out. Okay. Let's see. Anyone? Thank you, Amphelia, for the testimonial there. Joe, yeah, I know Aaron personally. Yeah, we've met several times. Aaron's awesome. His whole team's awesome. Nick Birch is great. He's a great guy. His son, Dustin. Aaron's son, Dustin. Yeah, they're all great over there. I love the guys over at Creature Art Teacher. Guys and girls, sorry. Okay, I am a bit more silent here because we're just wrapping up. We're just putting in some final bits of color information here, and we will get out of here. Beginner here. Hi, Alan. Alan is a fully beginner. He says, been at it for 1 week. All right, well, welcome to the world of art. You are in for a ride. Where do you start? Well, I mean, I think you're in the right place. This particular live stream will be a little beyond like a 1 week beginner, but you can check out, really where you want to start is drawing fundamentals. That's where you want to start. That is why I published my book, Debt-Free Art Degree, Foundations in Drawing. Let me just put that in the chat. I haven't done that yet. Debt-Free Art Degree, Foundations in Drawing. That is a book. You can order it right now. It delivers worldwide. It's also in bookstores. The thing about drawing is drawing fundamentals will give you the language of shape, design, form, gesture. It'll give you those fundamentals that you then apply to everything you do. There's even in this painting, which is, you might be like, oh, how are you applying gesture in this painting? It's not a figure. Well, my strokes are gestural, and I learned that from gesture drawing from the figure. So I highly recommend that a beginner artist do a lot of figure drawing. This is nothing new. People have been touting the benefits of figure drawing for forever, but I fully echo it. The figure is such an important thing to understand. You don't have to like dive deep into anatomy, although you can get there eventually. It's just like understanding how to capture poses with quick sketches, gestures, and then building forms. So like, you know, these rocks have a lot of form. As you can see, I've modeled a lot of it in. The way I know how to do that is because I've trained my brain over the years to understand 3D form. A lot of that comes from drawing exercises, not necessarily painting. Like, yes, painting too, of course, but it all roots itself in drawing. Thanks, Joe. May, how much time should you spend? I've been spending a lot longer on this chat. I've been painting for a bit over an hour. I could have been done half hour ago, and if I wasn't talking, I would probably do about half hour. That's just a general, though, outline. Like, you do not have to limit. Don't set a timer. A lot of people, like, I remember a few years ago, like, speed painting was kind of a big term, and I remember being kind of enveloped by it, being like, oh, speed painting, I got to paint fast. I don't think that's true anymore. You will get faster with experience. So don't set a timer. It just will add stress to your life. Who needs that? Do think about the relationships of color you're capturing on like a basic level. That is the thing to focus on, which this live chat has gotten at, and of course, tons of my videos talk about. My YouTube videos, premium lessons, etc. I'm very big on understanding the basic relationships of color, warm versus cool, things like that. Once you can capture that quickly, that's also where plein air painting comes in, because when you're painting from life, you are forced to capture those things quickly, because again, the light is going to move on you. By the way, this is just a linear dodge brush. I'm just going to add a bit more of this effect of extremely strong light, almost glowing off of some of these things. You see I did it here too. I exaggerated it here. You see this shadow right here? Whoops, why can't that? Oh, hang on. You see this shadow here? How there is this glow? That is an exaggeration of what happens in life, in real life, where you have these strong areas of sun. It can be so strong that it kind of blows out the lens almost. If you think about it like photography, it blows out the lens and like bleeds into the shadows next to it. Yeah. Soroka, speed painting for me has only ever been a term applied to sped up painting videos. That's funny. This is dating me back now, but I remember for me, people used to call painting fast. Like people would like set a timer like 20 minutes and like paint a scene, and they would call that speed painting. And I remember being like, really like super impressed by it. These days, it doesn't really hold the same allure for me, just because I think that like for me, it's just information is however long it takes you to capture information. That's what is impressive, not how fast you can do it. Now, as I've been saying, you will get faster naturally with time and experience. Being quick is important in the commercial world. Deadlines only get faster. So being fast is a skill that is worth pursuing, but that should not be the primary driver. Speed will happen with time. And experience, sorry. Oh, thanks, Julia. I'm glad you liked it. I really enjoyed filming that one. The creature, that is the creature art teacher class, which is exclusive to Aaron Blaze and his platform there. Okay, I'm stuck in the loop here where I'm like, I feel like I'm done, but here I am still painting. A bit of vegetation here in the rock. This is my multiply brush, right? Just multiplies, it darkens things like a watercolor sort of brush. I'm just noticing there are layers of vegetation that I have not got in. That's okay. Put it in now. Vegetation is very predictable. It'll be some of the darkest values in your piece. Vegetation, trees, bushes capture light. It traps light. That's how it quite literally feeds itself, is by the photosynthesis thing. It traps light. So vegetation is nice because it will usually give you a really interesting kind of dark pattern. Vito says, do you often fight the feeling to make a certain choice, but your studies, theories tell you the opposite? That's a good question. I think that relates a lot to just that general idea where you learn the fundamentals so that you can break them. Like art is not, there's no rules, right? There are fundamentals, like fundamentals being like how nature works. Like what does nature do? How does form work in nature? How does color work in nature? Those are worthy to learn, but ultimately, absolutely, I have had it happen to me, what you're describing, where it's like, nature might go one way, but you're like, but I want to do it this way. And you should do it your way in that case, and see where the limits are. I'm a big fan of like trying something and seeing where the limits are of that thing. Like, for example, I'll try it here. Like how far I'm trying to paint this. See this water that's washing up on the shore? See, it's like kind of purpley. I'm like, okay, how purple can I push that? How can I like really get that purple? How purple can I get? I'm interested in pushing that. And you'll probably find that some of your exaggerations in that realm will really like bear a lot of fruit. And other times it's like, nope, can't push it that far. Deborah, are there any fundamentals for digital art that are different to traditional art? No, I'm going to say no. Like, we're not talking tools. The tools are very different. Fundamentals, no. It's the same. But you should learn, like, when you're working with digital, the way layers work is completely foreign to traditional most of the time. But that's the tools. The fundamentals are, they supersede the tools, right? There is the slightest bit of reflection coming down from these rocks. I've got my multiply brush, right? I'm just stroking downward to get the sense of these rock forms projecting themselves into the water in a pleasing way. Anya says, love the purple there. Beautiful. Okay, see, like, thank you, first of all. That is an example of taking what nature does and caricaturing it. Think of we all know what caricature is, right? Like the typical heads, caricature artists draw heads. I actually started my professional career in caricature. I wanted to be a caricature artist, like first and foremost. I was obsessed with the media. I was obsessed with the art form in 2003-04. Caricature is interesting because by definition, you are exaggerating nature. You're taking a face, so usually caricature is a face, right? and you're pushing the features or pulling them. If something is small, you make it smaller. If something is big, you make it bigger. And yet, I'm sure we can all, this will ring true for a lot of people, a good caricature looks more like the person than the person. Have you all experienced that with caricature, with a good caricature? Why is that? It's because you are taking what nature does and exaggerating it in the direction that nature has already set out. And that tends to yield really pleasing results. Like that's what all my illustration is about. Like these paintings here that I happen to have on screen. These are caricatures of nature in terms of color. These are color caricatures. I'm taking what nature does and I'm pushing it. If a color is warm, I'm going to make it a bit warmer. Color is cool, I'm going to make it a bit cooler. Still respecting the neutrals in the middle though. That is how I paint. That's what I do. These studies on screen now, if I can get them, these are studies from life. These are not caricatured. I'm trying to capture more or less what nature is actually doing. Nature's beautiful. Nature will give you beautiful scenery. If you can learn to capture what nature does, you'll get the patterns of directions of colors in your head, then you can exaggerate them. That's the secret. Hey, Charlie. I didn't see you here, Charlie. No, I don't have a class on caricature. I am way too out of practice. Check out Court Jones. Court Jones has classes about caricature that are really, really good. You can find him on Proco. Court is a friend of mine. He used to draw. I plein air painted with Court. He's a great oil painter too, by the way. In fact, a lot of Court's caricatures are done with oil paint. But he's also great at quick sketching. He's kind of got it all. He's really, really good. Okay, folks, I am going to stop painting because like there's really nothing I can do here that is going to, all I can do is render now. And like you don't have to. I really don't like the shape of this rock. It's too much like a triangle. I would love if I spent more time on this, I would refine the shape of it. That tends to happen, by the way, with faster studies. Your shapes will kind of leave something to be desired. That's okay. Like, you know, I don't want anyone to feel like your studies don't have to be well drawn. The drawing can take a step back. As long as the color information is there, that's fine. If you are doing a finished illustration, of course, you will want to refine the drawing a bit more than I've done here. But there is a possibility of separating separating your drawing out of the equation a little bit, which is also, by the way, why I suggest rocks. Rocks tend to be very easy to draw, and you can get away with I've made this rock very triangular. You can get away with that because it's a rock, right? No one's going to know or care. If you do that with a human face, you're in big trouble because the drawing will just look so bad that it doesn't matter what the color's doing. But okay. Let's end here, and I will make a concerted effort, everyone, to do more live streams. I really enjoy it. It looks like people here are enjoying it. Before I go, I just want to remind everyone, if you use this link in the chat, you can get access to the replay, because I think this will go unlisted soon. So you can get access to the replay. And if you want, you can use code LIVE at www.marcobucciartstore.com for early Black Friday stuff. And I've got new classes in the works. I'm always new YouTube videos. Oh, and I'm on Super Peer. If you go to if you want a one-on-one session with me, you can go to Super Peer and book a session. Some of you here have already done that, like Charlie, for example. And you can book a Super Peer where we meet one-on-one for, usually it's a bit over an hour. It's like officially an hour, but usually we go a bit more. And we can talk about whatever you want to bring to the table. You bring your art, bring whatever, your portfolio, and we'll sit down one-on-one and go through it. And you can use the code LIVE there too to get a bit of a early Black Friday deal. All right. I believe that is all, folks. The chat is still banging, so thank you for that. It's been really cool to hang out with you guys and talk art. Oh, Anya, Super Peer. So Super Peer, you can also find Super Pure embedded in, let me put it in the chat. Super Pure also embedded in Skillshare. If you go to this, if you go to Skillshare, you don't need to sign up. You can go to one-on-one mentoring at Skillshare and search for me. You can find me there. You don't need an account. You can book a session like that too. Raya God, I want to stream more. I don't stream that often, like maybe 2 times a year historically, but I want to stream more. This is great. I really enjoy doing this. I'm catching up with the times. I'm sorry. I'm always late to these parties. I am always late to the party. But now that I'm here, I really enjoy it. So we will stream more. Okay, that is all from me. Thank you for your time. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this inspires your own studies. And yeah, I'll see you in more videos. I just put a YouTube video out yesterday. Go check that one out. I'm always making more stuff. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, and happy painting.